Anders, I think we're live, brother.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
First time for me.
Are you nervous?
A little bit. I have that like little weird feeling in my stomach, like you're going to a job interview or something. So a little
Yeah.
bit.
Even with me?
Even with you, man. It says live
Really?
and it's LinkedIn and you never know with these things. So
Right. So, do you have your coffee before we start?
I do, I do. Always halfway through second cup. So I, I'm with you.
Beautiful. So, hello everybody for the first time in 2021, a year everybody wanted to start so we can say goodbye to 2020. It's going to be the first coffee and productivity this year, so be patient with us. We're still kind of getting into gear, but I'm really happy that for the first episode I actually have here not just a great performer, but a really good friend, a really
Let's see
good
about
friend of
that, man.
mine, a really good friend of mine for I think around 10 years now, right? It's been 10 years since we started our master degree in finance. I think it was 2010. So um, I'm here with my friend Anders Thomsen, who was my classmate um, in the master degree of finance that we've been doing together. But at the moment, he's on a very exciting journey for the last few years, running his own company. No more hours. You clarify that for us, and it's been a very interesting professional journey that I would like to dig into. But Anas, why don't you introduce yourself briefly, shortly, uh, and your kind of a professional story, your journey from graduating as a master in finance, and what happened afterwards. How did you end
Sure.
up actually being a founder and CEO of NoMore?
Let me give it a shot. So yeah, like Soyan said, I finished my master's degree with along with him in 2012. Um, and after doing that, I joined McKinsey and Company, the management consulting firm, and worked there for a little bit more than 2.5 years on different topics, strategy, operations. Did some digital work, mainly in Copenhagen, but also in London and Frankfurt. Um, while being there, I was approached by a private equity fund, a relatively new private equity fund called CataCap here from Copenhagen. And they sort of convinced me to join them as an investment manager. Um, and there I got the responsibility of um, being part of their biggest investment at that point and trying to merge two companies in the sort of the building space, which was super exciting. And but even though that CataCap is a great place, and hopefully if this COVID thing doesn't turn things around too much, it's also going to be a great place financially. Um, I got I got this sort of this urge to try to get back into the sort of entrepreneurial game, you can say. I had the chance to co-found a sort of small education company while I studied, and also co-founded a case competition while I was at the university. So I had the experience of a few sort of small startups while at school, and the thought of being able to do that full time just got too intriguing. So that combined with the fact that I think we have a reasonably good idea, sort of led to me leaving this private equity fund after just 1 year to kind of start no more full time. So that's sort of my journey up until 2015, 2016, when we started no more. I started no more along with one of my long term friends, Lasse, and later had one of my other long term friends, Rune, joined the company as well. So it's sort of a gang of old friends who started it, and who's still sort of running it today, now 4.5, almost 5 years later.
Still friends.
Most of the times, at least. Most of the times, at least they tell me, and we do see each other outside of work as well. So I think we're still friends.
And while we're on the topic, was that something that helped you while building the company afterwards? Like having two people that you've been friends for a while, you trust each other. Was that something that was positive, or actually it also had the negative side of it?
I think there's definitely pros and cons with that. We worked together on different school projects, and we just know each other for a long time. Actually, me and Lasse met each other playing Counter Strike online, so we spent a long time competing uh, on that battleground, and known each other for I think almost 15 years by now. So we kind of knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. We know we could be honest with each other without hurting anybody's feelings and so on. I think so that was definitely a clear strength. But of course, there's also a flip side, because you do get into various arguments and so forth, and particularly things when things are not going too well. You always have this I can say this aspect that your co-founders also some of your best friends, and you don't want to upset your best friends, but sometimes you do, especially me being the CEO, especially you do want to tell things straightforward to your co-founders and have tough conversations. So I think it can go both ways, but I think in general, I think it's been a really big plus to us.
Yeah, and now how many people are working for you at the moment? No more.
So and full-time employees, we have 28 at the moment. And then, the way our business is set up, that's that we have our own sort of talent platform where we recruit designers from all around the world to help business professionals do PowerPoint slides more efficiently. So on that platform, I think we have more than 500 designers at this point. So that's sort of the numbers from a people perspective.
You know what I'm curious to hear more about? Actually, I've seen it
Sure.
maybe firsthand, but for the audience to hear more about what was it to build this startup, especially in the first 2-3 years? Like, what was the
Hmm.
reality of three co-founders coming together? How much
Yeah.
did you guys work? What did you have to do to be able to lift it off the ground?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So let's take the quantitative aspect first. So in terms of how much we worked a lot. So I remember as you know, and I'm sure many people in the audience know, being a consultant in McKinsey, you also work a lot of hours, and you actually have to like weekly note down how many hours you work. So I can say that on average at McKinsey I worked probably 70 hours or something like that per week. And I remember leaving there and people would be like, "Oh, it must be nice, not having to work so much." And I'll be like, "You have no idea, man. This is way, way, way harder." So at least for the first couple of years, we worked like night and day, and the majority of weekends, and it was really, really like really tough, sort of. And just to give like I mean, the reason, one of the reasons why we took so many hours, also because we kind of picked an industry where availability and service levels and so forth is really important, and we decided that we will be available from seven in the morning until 11 in the evening. And in the beginning, it was just me and Lasse, and then a bunch of interns, and we had to kind of be there, right? So we kind of, as by default, we were like available almost all the time. So it didn't leave a lot of time for not working or sleeping, anything like that. So it definitely took a big toll, and even like I think for the first 6 months or something like that, Lasse was even sleeping in the office. um,
And,
and we had
not just last, by the way, if you
no,
remember,
you did as well. I know you did as well.
like some people joined my workshop and
Mm.
and sometimes I mentioned this story that,
Mhm.
at some point in when I was starting my consulting and speaking
Mhm.
thing, I had to sleep in the office in Copenhagen, thanks to my good friend Anders, and in exchange
Yeah.
I would coach the
Yeah.
army of interns, I would say. Well, like that's also something really interesting, and I just
Mm.
want to if you can share a little bit about it. There were so many interns, man. How did you get so many people on board? Many of them were not paid at the beginning
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
guys didn't have
it
the
was.
funding, right?
Yeah, and it's actually, I mean, we can definitely talk more about that. But I think one of the big mistakes we did early on was the idea of just taking on too many people too early on and not being, picky enough with the people we had joined the company. So it turned out, and this is, I didn't know this before starting the company, but it's actually, at least in Copenhagen, it's fairly easy to find unpaid interns to come work for you, due to the way the education system is set up, and people want to build their resume early on, and there's a lot of people coming to Copenhagen from all over the world, especially before COVID. So there's a lot of eager young people that would like to join a company, probably particularly a startup, to kind of be part of the whole startup environment and all that. So we actually got a reasonable number of applicants for most jobs, also because we've been sort of English first and English only as a company language from the beginning. So we had particular non-Danish speakers applying for the jobs. We've got a fairly large number. And we sort of, we had this idea that we would scale really fast early on. So we just hired interns for some point, I think we had like 4 marketing interns and 4 sales interns. And, we had just like a bunch of very eager young people. We didn't have that much experience actually managing them. So I hope people had a good time. At least I think we had a lot of fun. But I think from a sort of business outcome perspective, I don't think it was the right thing to do.
So what did you do if you were starting, like, with all the knowledge, the experience now? If you start over again, what would be some of the things you would not do and do differently?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And it's actually something I thought a lot about. So maybe 2 things that come to mind. The first thing, if we sort of stay on the intern track, then I think I would not think about scale and hiring beyond like the very, very sort of essential people in the beginning. So it would only be like co-founders and maybe people that will sort of build the product or service. So maybe like 1 or 2 developers or something like that, but just really be exceptionally picky and only like take like the very best. And if you can't get the very best, then I think it's better just to do things yourself if you have the skill set. And then instead of wasting time on interns or on recruiting and so on, just spend the time on talking to customers, and building product/service based on their feedback. I wouldn't spend time on any marketing, sales, recruiting, social media, all these different things. That would just I think it's a little bit cliche if you read all that Y Combinator stuff, but I think they're actually right that just focusing on talking to clients and building something that they love. If you get that right, then all these other things can come later once you have something that really sticks. So I think that's the first one. And another sort of mistake we did as a company was that we started out with a sort of very broad, ambitious service/product portfolio. So we wanted to help business professionals not just with sort of PowerPoint design, which is what we do today, but we wanted to do research, we wanted to do Excel work, we wanted to do data entry, we wanted to do Word stuff. And the idea was that we would be like a junior associate on demand, where you could get like highly skilled people, more or less around the clock, at a fraction of the cost of having someone internally, and they could like kind of do everything like a talented young associate would be able to do. That was sort of the initial ambition. It turns out that is exceptionally hard. And it took us way too long to realize that, because we didn't spend enough time talking to our clients. So by having that broad focus, I think we wasted a lot of time that could have been spent on selecting a smaller niche and making that niche really well and having that stick, which what we eventually ended up doing. But I think we definitely wasted a lot of time and money on having that sort of broader perspective.
And I love that you're sharing this because in the last few years, I'm primarily working with startups, entrepreneurs, especially those that are a little bit more tech founders that are really product focused and so on. They have this challenge of not being able to talk to customers because we don't have the product is not ready yet, and how can I talk to people, and why should I talk to them now? And in reality, you don't need to have your product ready. In fact, you need to talk to people. Why do you build this product if it has not been verified by the market? Like, do the people actually need this product? And the second point that you mentioned is also really important in terms of your focus, especially early on. If you focus on 20 different directions, yes, you can experiment and test if that's something that's controlled in a controlled environment, which of those 15, 20 different things we should do. But then you really need to boil it down and focus on, as you said, at the moment, you guys are focused on PowerPoint support, right? And you have a very specific clients or
so that's definitely where we also sort of, in terms of our journey, we started both really broad in terms of what we did, but also like in terms of who we targeted. So we were basically offering these services to anyone. Like, it could have been even like students, or it can be like really large companies and anything in between, and educators, and basically anybody working with the Microsoft Office suite in any way we would claim to be relevant for. And that's also one of the other things that we sort of decided later on, is saying, well, we're going to be very, very sort of niche focused, and in terms of only focusing on the people who have the sort of most reoccurring need for what we do. And it's also a segment that we know really well, which is the sort of management consulting segment, both the sort of the classic management consultants, but then also the sort of in-house consultant teams at large organizations, who use PowerPoint a lot. Some of them use like maybe 20 hours or more of PowerPoint every week. So working with them, we can really be relevant, and we can really make a difference in their work lives, versus like someone like yourself that maybe do like one presentations or 2 or 5 a year, and then you travel around Europe and showcase the same presentation, maybe with a few tweaks. That's not really good business for us. We need the people that use it multiple presentations every month and so forth. So that's also been part of the sort of focus journey, to be really, really specific in terms of the customer segment.
What were some of for you, in terms of finding your own focus, but also keeping the focus of the team on the right things? Was there some kind of a moment, something that happened in the company, something that that made you realize we need to be really focused? And what did you do to actually create this culture where people stay focused on the things which are highest priority at the time?
It's a good question. I can't remember like any particular like moment where it was like, oh, okay, now we just need to focus. But I think especially as we start speaking more with customers and so on, and like also kind of looking at what were we actually delivering, and what was the experience of the customers and so forth. I think it just became very clear that especially early on, there was just so many ways we could get better. And I think originally I had this sort of little bit sort of naive idea that if we just work 80 hours a week, we could eventually just do all of these things, and prioritization wasn't like that essential, because we'll just work harder and do everything, and so forth. But I think kind of realizing a little bit and kind of reflecting back on, let's say looking back over the 6 months or so, and kind of realizing that, we didn't actually, finalize that many things. And the number of years we had kind of, kept growing, and also kind of realizing that because, in some cases we were kind of rushing, feature work and other parts of the service, we would kind of rush those a little bit, and then they would not necessarily get, great level of adoption. We were kind of, it became more and more clear to me that, the need for being super picky in terms of the things you actually do, is just super essential for actually having good outcomes. And I think that was also something where I think early on we were just, getting an idea, running with it without like considering all the other things we could eventually do. So that
The
was
opportunity cost. You didn't
yeah,
measure the opportunity
exactly,
cost.
and we didn't think enough about opportunity cost at all, and didn't like spend enough. We spent like a lot of time doing, but not that much time actually prioritizing and validating and so forth. So I think that has definitely improved, and still something that we think a lot about. And another thing that I think that helped us, be more focused is also, we started the company mainly with some money I had saved up in CataCap, and then like a really small sort of investing round from a group of friends and family. But eventually you can also like start looking at your Excel sheet and realize, well, you're not growing quite as fast as we wanted to, and given the amount of money we spend, we kind of need to make things, improve over a relatively short time to kind of stay around, right? So I think the sort of the urgency of cash burn, and so on was also one of the one of the things that eventually helped us become more selective with the things we do. Anyway, especially like we did, especially in the first couple of years, we had some unfortunate situations where we were too optimistic in terms of growth, and we hired some people we ended up not being able to afford and had to let go again, and we had a few situations like that, it's really sucked both for the people we had to let go, but also for the company as a whole. And it's never really fun letting anybody go, so we got ourselves into quite some trouble, as a result of this.
Yeah, thanks for being honest in sharing this really as usual, like the real story. And we're going to get back to some of these topics, but we have a question from Ibrahim, who's also running his startup right now.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Nigeria. Great guy. Ibrahim, great to have you. First of all, he's saying Happy New Year. And then he has a question. What are the key ways to engage with customers for constant feedback?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question. So my initial, so maybe just to, I'm not sure we'll have any universal answer for that, but I think I can kind of share what we do. So since we are a B2B business, all our clients kind of go through an introduction call before the potential become clients. That's like kind of prerequisite for us to potentially take them on, because we want to make sure that they are a good fit, that we can solve their problems and so on. So we sort of have it built into a model that we talk to any customer that potentially become a customer. And one of the good benefits of that is that if they decide to become a customer, we sort of already in those initial calls kind of schedule further follow-ups. So we will put in the calendar right away that, let's talk again in 3 months, and we will have that scheduled. So we'll sort of have those conversations down the line. I think it's a super low practical thing, but just having those kind of feedback calls, very similar to this kind of call, I think is one very low practical way that I think helps. Other than that, we of course have we have a rating system. So every time we do something for a client, we ask for a rating, and depending on whether the rating is good or bad, we of course take action. And if we occasionally, of course it does happen from time to time, do something that people don't like, we also, call them up and try to find solutions and so on. So we're trying to kind of build it into our processes, that feedback becomes an essential part of the way we operate. So I think that's at least something to consider, whether that's possible for your case.
And when you talk about feedback, one thing is feedback from customers, but also what about feedback within the team internally, in
Mm.
terms of how do you guys do things? How do you, let's say, how does the salespeople approach the customers? Like, do you have any practices or like meetings where you can actually have feedback? You
Yeah.
receive feedback as well as a CEO, which many CEOs are struggling with to
Mm.
get the actual data, because
Mm-hmm.
people sometimes get afraid. Oh, but this is the boss. I don't want to tell them that they're not doing things right. So
Right.
do you guys have any things that work for you?
I think it works fairly well. So very much inspired by my time in McKinsey, we sort of from the beginning have had a quite large focus on feedback. So all managers, both myself, my co-founders, and the other sort of team leads in the organization, have like a mandatory feedback 1 hour feedback talk with each of their direct reports each month, and where we have a sort of standardized feedback structure, um, which is two-way feedback. So the first part is about the employee, about how he or she is doing, where we also talk about their development goals, and the manager shares observations on what they've seen, sharing specific examples of what they've seen, both good and bad, particularly related to those development goals. And then that's a sort of the two-way part where the employee then shares their observations the other way, and that's like a conversation about how the manager can help the employee be more successful at achieving their goals and so forth. So I think we have a relatively structured approach for it, where we try to really encourage these talks quite frequently.
And are people actually, how do you feel about it now? Like, are people, you know,
It's a
especially
good
in
question. Good
pandemic
question.
situation, right? Like, people are home and they don't really meet each other. You can't really just grab John at the coffee
No,
machine and say, "Hey,
no,
John,"
no,
like,
no. I think it's actually one of the we have had employees that have faced stress issues, and both for professionals and personal reasons and so on. I think that these feedback sessions are really, really essential, because I think without them, I don't think you necessarily catch these cases, right? Because you don't see people as often, and you don't get a feeling of whether they're feeling good or bad when you don't meet up in person. So I think the feedbacks has definitely helped. I'm sure. I mean, we can all also get better at this. We're really far from perfect when it comes to the implementation of feedback, but I think it has helped in some cases to avoid burnout with certain employees, even in this sort of Zoom era, or whatever we're calling it.
you know, uh, in the book that you actually contributed with some examples too. Thank you for that. Perform the unsexy truth about startup success, which I've co-written with Cristobal Alonso, the CEO of the leading B2B accelerator, Startup Wise Guys in Europe.
Mhm,
Um, we have a chapter that's mainly focused on feedback. It's the chapter about robust communication and
mhm,
just the importance of actually prioritizing these conversations and making it part of the structure and the process. And there's multiple researches and studies you can find online, uh, which talk about the positive effect feedback has. Not only the positive feedback, praising people, but also constructive feedback. People just want to know, because
mhm,
if we don't talk about it, sometimes people assume maybe he's not happy, but he doesn't want to tell me.
mhm,
And that creates a little bit of a, and it's like, I'm not going to talk about it now. Let's
mm,
And then at some point it's like, yeah, but we missed so much opportunity to actually create this environment where people feel safe also to bring up the issues.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the books that I'll still have to read your book, and I ordered the physical copy, so looking forward to that. But one of the books that I recently, I wouldn't say recently, like 2 years ago or something like that, I read the book Radical Candor, that you might know. Very, very recommended. And I think, and one of the main points of that book is also the value of sharing the bad as well as the good. And where one of the points that really stuck with me is that it's a lot of times it's the things that's hard to say, that even though it hurts hearing them, it is the things that is most beneficial sort of in the longer run. And the book is filled with various examples of that. But I think once we introduced that, sort of me, Lasse and Rune, sort of my co-founders, and we all read that, and I think, well, you could also really see that. I think it also helped us being more honest with each other, and being not adding too much filter, but kind of just saying things for what they were. So I think that's definitely, in addition to Stoyan's book, if you haven't read the Radical Candor one, that's definitely worth a read when it comes to feedback and the value of being candid with your team and with yourself.
Yeah, another great book on the topic, and we're gonna wrap up this part, but it's Crucial Conversations. It's
I haven't read
an exceptional book. It's about how to communicate when stakes are high, how to have these tough conversations and set it up so you don't make it personal. You really approach the problem, but you address the problem, but it's not about pointing fingers. It's about how can we constructively get over this situation by communicating the information. As my co-founder likes to say, feedback is data. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, just think about it. Any feedback is data. So it doesn't have. You don't have to take it. Not every data is useful, but it's data. When you have data, you can do something about it. So just by having this assumption, for me personally, it makes me more receptible to feedback. Thank you for the data. So and then you decide what you want to do with it. So
I like that.
But anyway, I want to get back to the times of struggle, and 2020 has been a year of really difficult time for many people, including startups, entrepreneurs, and even before 2020, you did share, and you've been sharing with me previously, as every other person, as a founder, as a CEO, you've been going through different challenges, and I don't think we talk enough about this. We just we like to see these stories of this startup raised this amount of money, and they have this thing, and look at this TikTok app, and like. But I don't think we speak enough about the actual struggles and how do we mentally go through this. So I just want to hear from you, maybe like if you can recall some of the most difficult moments where you guys were probably running out of cash, and you had some misunderstandings in the team. I don't know what they are, but what was it for you, and what helped you to kind of connect to this mental toughness within yourself to get over this situation and address it from a higher consciousness or whatever?
Oof, that's a tricky question. I mean, I can take you through some of the main challenges we had. So I think I also mentioned it before, but we faced like at least 2 or 3 cases where we were running low on cash, and we had to let people go. And I think a particular tricky one was when we decided to drop. So we started out with all these different services. We eventually cut it down to 2 services, one being PowerPoint and the other one being sort of a form of desk research that was mainly targeted at corporate finance professionals. And at some point, we could kind of, we had a limited amount of money in the bank, and we kind of see that, we need to make some relatively drastic decisions. And I think at that point, the research was probably like 35 to 40% of our business, and the PowerPoint was the rest. And we had, a full-time, I think at least one maybe 2 full-time people working on the research part, as well as hundreds of people on our sort of platform. They're also making a living through this. But we could kind of see that the how can you say, it's particularly the amount of business development time we had that was needed in order to make both the research and the PowerPoint business succeed was just too limited to make that work. So we had to make the decision of what do we do. At the same time, because we were cash constrained and because our margins in actually both businesses was under quite some pressure, because it's a relatively affordable service, which puts a lot of margin pressure on it. We had to do like multiple different decisions like at once. So me and my co-founders, we met up a weekend, and we basically over like one day of tough conversations, we ended up cutting away our research arm, closing down, letting go of half our team in Copenhagen, and then deciding to start an office in Portugal instead. As and I'm sure many other listeners know, the cost of operating in Copenhagen is pretty high, and especially when you have to find really talented people, it can be extremely expensive. And so by creating a office in Portugal, basically allowed us to find great people at a sort of rate that was more sustainable from a business perspective. So we had to make all those decisions and let quite a lot of people go, and really sort of to do whatever it took to kind of stay afloat. So I think that's particularly like one case that comes to mind. That definitely what was tough.
And this is something that actually you've been in my advisory board in the video production company. I'm often turning to advice when I have a big decision to make, and you've always been providing some really good perspective. And one of the things I remember as an advice you gave me at some point, I don't even remember the situation, but I had something and I was like, yeah, but this person, I really care. And then you were like, look, man, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to take care of the business, and the business involves a lot of people. If you have to let one person go, even if you care, even if it doesn't work at the moment, if it's not going to support like, you have the responsibility as a leader, so you need to do the tough choices sometimes. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care. Quite the opposite.
No.
You should actually care about people. But just like you said, I mean, you as a CEO, like, you might be the fancy person that pitches at conferences and everybody's cheering on, and
That's your game. That's not me,
man. but at the end of the day, you're the one that needs to also be the alpha, right? The leader that's taking the tough choices, even if it's not convenient, if it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's sometimes right. Sometimes you have to sacrifice the few to save the many, and I think so that we definitely had to do that, quite a few times, particularly early on. What we did do, however, is that we really tried to help people, find new jobs and find new places and so forth. So we actually did set up quite some time, using our own network and helping them, write resumes and did recommendations and so forth. So one of the things that kind of makes me sleep a little bit better at night when my daughter's not crying is knowing that I can see that the people we let go, many of them ended up in comparable, but actually most of them ended up in better positions than what we could have offered them anyway. So I think that's really good to see that even though it's never fun to let anybody go, and I'm unfortunately I haven't tried it, but I'm very certain that it's not fun in any way to be let go either. I think for the people we had to go through that process with us, they did end up in a better place. So I think that definitely helps.
We have a couple of questions coming. First of all, Iskra is saying, "Hi, Stoyan, Anas. So happy to catch you live today." And then she has another comment. "I love the topic. It is of such an importance today." And we have a comment from Andre, who's actually been in your office, Anas, a couple of years
Oh,
ago when we visited you. Uh,
cool.
so Andre is saying, I can totally relate to what you're sharing, Anas. I remember when we visited you in Copenhagen a couple of years ago. What has changed since then for your company? What were the most difficult aspects to
hmm
keep your company going? What
hmm
is the most
Sure.
valuable lesson you learned?
Yeah, I think to answer that, I probably have to repeat myself a little bit again. I think, you know, as we talked about, being exceptionally focused on doing a few things very well, being very, very selective with the people you hire, you know, and then I think so, you know, and then I think the third one is also be, very sort of very cost conscious, and being probably have to be a little bit more pessimistic when it comes to your forecast, and be very sort of very, very good at managing your cash flow, which is relatively sort of operational advice, but I think it is really essential. We did had some
Can you can
clients
you
that was
can you
great clients, but they didn't pay their invoices. So you might have the revenue, but you might not have the cash, and you need the cash to pay the employees, right?
so
Um,
can you I just wanted to, like, because this is such an important topic. You said to
mhm,
be really good in managing your cash flow. What
mhm,
would be some practical operational advice you can share that you learned
sure.
in the last 4 or 5 years?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think some of the things in the beginning we were, I mean, even though I have a degree in finance, we were not spending that much time in Excel. We were, spending time on building stuff and marketing and sales and trying to get the company to grow. And then, once every quarter we would like sit down and do the books and kind of look at the financials and so forth. And I think that's maybe that was okay at that point of time, but I think after a relatively short period of time, I think it is extremely important to get really sort of operational and make sure that you have a very sort of clear view on where you are financially. So like I think one of the things that I definitely recommend people doing is that make sure that your books are up to date, so that you reconcile your accounts on a monthly basis or have someone do it for you, so that you actually know what was your revenue, what was your cost like, what does your balance sheet look like, um, and then have some form of relatively simple Excel forecast model where you can kind of plot in based on certain revenue assumptions, based on some cost assumptions, where you're going to be from a cash flow perspective. And I think one of the very, very important things is to, especially if you're in a B2B setting, is to not lose sight of your debtors, so basically the clients that owe you money. Um, to be very, very on top of them, and you have to actually dedicate a meaningful amount of time to actually collecting your money. um, of course, if you charge only make money by charging people's credit cards, this is not like a real thing. But if you have more of traditional sending out invoices and credit days and all of that kind of setup, then I think that this thing becomes super, super key. And I know, Stoyan, you can also speak to that. I remember you had a client not paying you a lot of money at some point.
Yeah, and,
Uh,
and, and it's as you said, it's like you have, like, you generated the revenue, right? But like you don't have the cash because, uh, and I'm actually curious if you have any recommendations, like, because corporates and so on, they sometimes they're known for the fact that they'll pay you, that's for sure.
mhm. Yeah,
But
that's a
is
good
it
point.
gonna be in a week? Is it gonna be in 2 months? They might
Mhm.
actually kind of postpone the payments. And what do you do in such situations? Like, do you set up something in the contracts that they need to pay you within 2 weeks? But then again, you need this
Yeah,
big
I mean,
customer and they have their rules. So how do you actually deal with that?
it's a really good question. I mean, it depends on the clients. Some of them just have procurement rules, and there's no way of bending them. Um, what we do is that we have a standard set of terms where there's 2 weeks of credit by default, and then um, like most of the times when you have the discussion with those large clients, it's a more holistic discussion, right? So you don't discuss all sorts of SLAs, but you also discuss price, and then you also discuss payments. And then what we try to do is that if clients have very strict payment terms, then we want to be compensated on the price. So if they say, well, our rules is that it's 120 credit days or something crazy like that, then we might be like, okay, that's okay, but then we have to increase the price by, let's say, 10% or something like that, so that we get compensated for being their bank, basically. So that's sort of like one thing. But I think what's been most effective from us basically is really, really simple. It's like, make sure we have late fees in the contract, so that you can actually penalize someone for missing the agreed terms, so that you don't become an unprofitable bank, but you at least you make some interest on the overdues. It also gives you a way to like leverage a little bit of leverage in the conversation, where you can be like reminding them that if you don't pay within X number of days, then you have to apply late fees. So if they could please do that, then everybody wins. I know some people are more strict than us. Some people will be like, if you miss the payment date by just a couple of days, then you get a warning saying that if you don't pay right away, you're gonna get reported to the authorities as a bad payer, which is something you can do in Denmark, but which is really tricky in other countries. And then after a set number of days, they just report them, and then a lot of times you end up getting your money because you don't want to get reported. We can't really do that, since I think we have so little revenue coming out of Denmark by now. So what we do is we just send them reminders, we call them, and then one of the benefits we have is that the vast majority of our clients are recurring customers. So if it goes really bad, we can kind of just stop serving them. So we can kind of block the use of our service for the people in the organization, and that normally triggers a payment, because the employees gets mad if they can't use it and so forth. But just constant reminding, calling people, and being relatively aggressive, kind of at least for us, has really sort of reduced the amount of debtors very substantially. But
Yeah, and
it's
it also
time.
depends on. It also, I guess, depends on the stage. Now you guys are more established. You can actually afford to, like to say no to a client because you're in a better position. But if
Yeah,
you're just
definitely.
starting now and it's like this big customer is coming in and
Uh-huh.
they have a lot more power, so that's when it's like
Yeah.
it's a
100%. And
little more. But
we have some horrible contracts, which has big names on them, but where the price was way too low and it had way too many credit days, but we just wanted to close the clients, and we have a few of those like still laying around somewhere. So we also been there for sure.
one thing I really want to talk about is by being close to you guys in the early days and so on. One thing that was really really cool to observe is
Mhm.
is how you guys measure things, like
Mhm.
measuring and being accountable. For example, sales. How many self calls? How many lead to this? And maybe if you can talk to me about a little bit about the importance to actually measuring things
Mhm.
with respect to performance.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biases I have from being a consultant to being very data and quantitative. Yeah, so I think from sort of from the beginnings, we had a very large sort of focus on everything measurable. And I think in the end, I think I think one quote I like is like, um, I think in God we trust. Everybody else brings data, and and I think that sort of philosophy of being very sort of data driven has been, I think, at the core of what we've done. And why is that important? I think it's if you don't have a sort of unbiased view on how you're doing, then it's extremely hard to figure out what is working and what's not working, right? So like the data becomes like the measure of success, and then you have to like see all the initiatives that you do they improve the metric, or do they have the inverse effect, and so on. Yeah, so that's I think the reason why. And Of course, it also helps, like from a managerial perspective, to kind of have some to set goals and directions and budgets and all these different things. I think that's of course.
So what are some metrics that, let's say there's an early stage founder and they want to start set up those kind of metrics? Like, what are some of those metrics
Mhm.
that they should pay attention to?
Yeah, so I think it's important to figure out like what is really like what metric is highly correlated or related to the value that you bring. So in our case, as we are like a service organization in the end, even it's very tech driven. It's in the end it's a service organization. So what we look at is how many hours of work have we done for our clients, because that's like a measure of the value we have added, right? The more work we have done for them, the more more value we hopefully had done. So we look at that, and then we look at what is the net promoter score from that work. So we look at like the amount of value and the quality of the value. And then we have a lot of other sort of more operational things, but those are like the two core ones. And I think so if you can find some kind of measure that is like a measure of the value created. I think if you have for example, if you have run a social media platform, it could be stuff like the amount of interactions or the amount of friends being connected or the active users or what do I know, right? So you have to like find out what sort of metric correlates with the value that you bring to the world, and then you want to keep a close eye on that. And then of course also anything like high level financially, if you have that luxury of having revenue and these kind of things, then you of course also want to look at that.
And how much from this decision making, like when you're setting goals strategically, how much does it come from you guys with respect to the your advisory board and advisors that you guys are having, investors? Like how much
Mhm.
of the percentage is coming from you guys, and, like.
I think it's I think in the end, the investors we have, they invested into us because, we are quite ambitious in many ways. So they don't need to push us, to set high ambitions. I think we do that, by default. So I think to a large extent it is driven by our own ambitions. And I think what at least for me personally, what really drives my ambition to high extent is that it is kind of the opportunity cost aspect to some extent. A lot of my peers are now like partners in consulting companies or corporate finance houses, and they're making a whole lot more money than I am. And I think for the only way for this whole venture to be, at least from a financial perspective, to be a good investment is for us to be really ambitious and to have to be able to drive a big outcome and create a lot of value. So to me, that definitely drives it a lot. But yeah, I mean, the last when we did the budget here for 21, we followed our investors' advice, which is what he called the rule of 40, which is basically the idea that the sum of your growth rate and your EBITDA rate should equal 40. So if you're growing 30% and have 20% EBITDA margin, then you're sort of hitting the rule of 40. But you could also do 50% growth and then minus 10 EBITDA, and you also sort of hitting the rule of 40. That combined, those two metrics should sum to 40 or more. So that was sort of the ambition we agreed on for this year. We ended up a little bit higher, but that's sort of where we ended up. Yeah.
And before we kind of wrap up the whole episode, I just want to explore a little bit about the way you're setting goals.
Hmm.
Now you're leader of 28 full-time employees. There's a lot of freelancers that you're working with. So there's a lot of responsibility that's on your shoulders, obviously, with that.
Mm.
Um, what is your process? Like very practically, operationally, what's your process of
Yeah.
setting goals? How
Hmm.
often, how frequently do you actually sit together? Do you do it with your team? Do you go to a retreat? What's
Yeah.
the process?
So we follow at least we've been doing that for the last 2 years now. We've been using OKRs. so objectives and key results, which I think I really recommend. And for those that are not familiar with that, what it basically means is that once every quarter, we set the priorities for the company for the quarter to come. And sort of on a very practical note, the way we do it is that me and the other founders, both with some input from our investor, we identify a set somewhere between 2 and 4 high-level objectives for the company, and then which are, how can you say, non-quantifiable objectives. It could be, for example, we are in the process of starting an office in Mexico, and so one of the objectives we have for this quarter is to, we're calling it fuel the fire in Mexico, really accelerate the buildup of the team over there. So that's like one of the 4 objectives, and then associated with each objective, we have some key results, which are more sort of measurable targets. So, for example, one of the key results is that we want to have at least 5 people hired, and have them through our internal university process by the end of the quarter. So that's more like measurable, trackable targets. So you have the objectives, and you have these key results associated with each objective, and then basically what happens is that the different management layers talk to their teams, and they figure out, okay, so how can we support the overall objective from our team. For example, if you're on the finance team, you might look at this thing with the Mexico thing and be like, okay, well, we might be able to support that by ensuring that we know exactly what the salary level should be. We make sure that all our forecast models are up to date with any implications of that, and we might be able to like dedicate a budget or different things associated with that objective. So you kind of let the organization do a more of a bottom-up approach to identifying ways you can support the high-level objective. There's a lot of great writing on this that explains it a lot better than I do. But I think personally, I think it's been really, really good for us to start doing that sort of quarterly cadence.
I love listening to you right now, because when I interviewed you for the book, I think it was like almost a couple of years ago, and then you were like just briefly starting with the OKRs, and you were not able to give me any data back then, but I think OKRs are really, really good because they're simple, and quarterly it just makes sense. It's just so simple. So some companies are having this kind of like company objectives, while others they kind of do it in departments. 2 to 4 or 3 to 5 objectives per quarter for each department, and then kind of align with the other departments, and then it's about execution. But it's all tangible because of the key results, and you just focus and try to support each other's departments. What I'm curious to know is, okay, now that you said the objectives and key results, you as a CEO, how do you kind of put this into action, like on the week-to-week basis, day-to-day basis? How do you make sure that you're spending your time appropriately, also in between this leadership role versus operational execution, getting things done, kind of?
So actually, me and my co-founders, we have a meeting every week, which we call our weekly retrospective. And as part of that, at least every second week, we besides like evaluating the week and talking about priorities for the next week, we also take a look at the OKRs, and it kind of make sure that the things we set forth to do is high on the priority list. So that's on a sort of very practical in practical terms what we actually do. I think it's just making sure that they are top of mind, making sure that we track the progress, make sure that keep people accountable when we follow up, and then of course we try to based on the progress, try to dedicate problem solving time to the particular OKRs that need support.
And it works.
I think so. I mean, it's still. I think we're still not perfect in the way we run the OKRs. We're still trying to tweak the approach. And I think one thing we do in this quarter is we adding a sort of mid-quarter review where I'll personally have meetings with everyone that owns an OKR to get like an update on how it's going and talk about how can we make sure that things goes well and so far. So we constantly tweaking the process also in terms of how we track it and who has OKRs, who doesn't, and so forth. So, but I think it's a good tool and something we'll keep doing.
Anders, before we wrap up, I actually have a question that I think many people might benefit from the answer from.
Mm-hmm.
You seem like a very confident guy. You are, because I know you now for 10 years and I've seen you in difficult, challenging times and so on. What do you do when you are feeling really overwhelmed? Maybe you're exhausted and stressed, like everybody has these kind of days.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there is a big decision to make or you have a lot on your to-do list. What do you do to deal with this, basically?
I talk with my wife, which I've so I think she's probably the best coach I have. She can also be very, very candid with me. Yeah, I think that's probably the main go-to. I don't think I have any magic tricks.
No, do you go for a walk? Do you make a pause? Do you what do you do to kind of get back to this more present and productive state?
That's a good question, man. I wish I had I don't think there's any one tool I do. I mean, I have one of the things that sort of keep me from not going crazy or getting overstressed is just I have this arrangement with my wife that at least once a week I can just sleep without an alarm clock, and she sort of takes care of our daughter. And so those Saturday mornings where I can sleep for a long time, that's sort of normally where I reset. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm blessed by not being I very rarely get truly stressed, and so I think I have a probably relatively high bar for the amount of work I can put on myself. So I think that's but that's probably more. I'm not sure whether it's just training or luck or a mixture, but I think I'm really lucky in that perspective compared to other people.
Actually, Ibrahim is back on the stream. And he's sharing
Yeah,
his same here, learning so much. Ibrahim says, sleep is excellent.
Fully agree, man.
Ibrahim, doubly agree. Thanks for joining us today. Anders, what last question? If you have a couple of minutes, it's what is interesting, and I'm sure some people actually notice on the poster is you've been a CEO and CTO, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage to combine both roles, which are quite demanding, and how's it been working for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure whether it's something I would recommend to anybody else. Basically, when we started out, as I said in the beginning, we had very limited funds. We had my saving, and we had a little bit of investor money, but we didn't have enough to hire someone like a real CTO. Particularly not one in Copenhagen, because those guys are really, really, really expensive. So I actually spent I spent sort of my free time in the last 6 months. I was working in private equity to kind of learn and relearn, how to program. Mainly from we kind of had to. I mean, I also think it's interesting, right? And I think it's I like building stuff and so on. So it's not like it should be considered full torture. I definitely like it, but we just couldn't do what we wanted to do with the finances we had. Maybe it would have been better to raise some money and hire a full-time CTO. But at the time we were very, very cost conscious and wanted to keep more equity on our own hands and so forth. So we kind of started out like that, with me building sort of the first version of our platform and a big part of our technology since then. So I mean, and then the only way we can make it work, at this point with this scale is because my co-founders, just takes a lot of responsibility and really drives their functions, very self-standingly. So even though I'm the CEO, both Lasse and Rune does a lot of CEO work, both in terms of facing the client and in terms of facing the team. So I think that's kind of how we make it work, right? But I definitely don't recommend that on anyone to kind of take those dual roles.
Right. It's never there's not like one solution for like everything depends on who do you have around you, what's your
Yeah.
ambitions, how do you work, and all these kind of things. And I think that's really important for those listening as well. Like you can read 50 books and but at the end of the day you got to trust yourself and just look around and how can you get the most out of the situation with respect to your ambitions that you have. So
Mm,
thank you Anas for being here with us, for sharing openly all these things. I probably have 20 more questions, I'm sure the audience has too, so hopefully we can have you back at some point.
sure.
Anas, before we go, where can we find where can we find No More Hours, to give a shout out to you guys or the amazing
Yeah.
work that you
I
do.
mean, so we are exceptionally silent, and I am as well on any form of social media and these kind of things. So I mean, I think the best thing is just check out our website. If you are a consultant working in PowerPoint, feel free to set up a demo and see whether we might be helpful for you. So I
What's the
think that's
webpage?
it's
What's the webpage?
nomorehours.com.
Okay, I'm gonna put it here on the screen for
There we go. That's the
sure.
one.
So
That's
go check
us.
out nomorehours.com. And what about yourself? Can people connect with you like on LinkedIn or
I
somewhere
mean,
else? Or
feel
you're
free to
not there?
connect with me on LinkedIn. I normally accept most people, but I'm not super active. So if I don't accept you within the first week or two, then it's nothing personal. Just have other things to do. But yeah, happy to connect. So
Thank you
feel
so
free.
much, Anas, for being here. Thanks for everybody listening. And once again, if you want to go and see some learnings and cases from founders like Anas, 50 plus founders and thought leaders from specifically Europe, you can go check out our book. It just been launched after 2 years of hard work, doing interviews, writing the book, doing re-edits and revisions and everything else. The link is deeperformbook.com. At the moment, you can find it on a discount and get yourself pre-order a signed copy or get a digital copy. So go check it out and see if that might be something for you. Thank you so much for everybody listening and being with us. Thank you, Ibrahim, for your multiple comments. And see you once again for Coffee and Productivity for the next episode.